globally. We have around 750 members all over the world. And as part of the different activities that we do, we include industry-leading events that happen in different regions in the world, but also large events like the Mobile World Congress that happens every year. But also the GSMA drives action for the mobile industry to commit to different activities, such as the commitment from the mobile industry to the Sustainable Development Goals. Within the GSMA, we have a program called the GSMA Assistive Tech. This is part of a larger program called Mobile for Development. And our mission is to advance the digital inclusion of people with disabilities. Now, the reason why that is important is because there is over 1 billion people in the world that live with some form of disabilities. That is around 15% of the global population. Many of them, around 80% of them, live in a low or a middle income country. And around 90% of the people who need an assistive technology do not have access to one of them. So this is the reason why we believe that mobiles are important tools that can help access many different services and many different products that people may not have access to. And mobile offers different assistive technologies that are embedded in them that can enable that access. But there are many different barriers to digital inclusion, and we need to find ways in which we can address them. So our program works in 3 main areas. We have insights, we conduct research, and we generate evidence to try to understand what is the characteristics of the characteristic of digital inclusion of people with disabilities. We focus on trying to understand the digital divide, or what we call the mobile disability gap. We look at these in terms of ownership, but also access, or ownership of mobile, but also access to mobile internet and use of mobile internet. We have market engagement, which it's our team that works together with mobile operators and other stakeholders to try to drive actions, try to bring new services and products for people with disabilities. And we also have advocacy. So we want to increase awareness, and we want to increase the knowledge that we can communicate with our stakeholders to drive together actions towards closing the digital divide. We cannot do it on our own, so we need the involvement and the participation from different stakeholders, from different sectors. So that's what we do in terms of advocacy. Like I said, during the past 1.5 years, a lot of our work has been related to research. So we have 4 publications that have been published since December, looking at the mobile disability gap in different aspects. We also have conducted research to try to understand what are the actions that are happening in the mobile industry in terms of inclusion of people with disabilities. And we also conducted a landscape study to try to better understand the digital assistive tech innovations that are emerging from Africa and Asia. So in the session today, I will give you some little snippets, some insights from all these pieces of work that we've conducted. It will be just the key highlights, so I invite you to go to our website and look at our research if you want to get more knowledge in the topic. So to start our conversation, I will introduce you to a very important concept. So when we talk about disabilities, it's actually quite complex, and it's actually something that is really difficult to define. But there are different perspectives that have been used to define disabilities. The 2 mainstream models are the medical and the social model of disabilities. The medical model has been used traditionally, and it has a basis in the definition of disability that is very biomedical. As such, what happens is that disability is often perceived as a condition, is perceived as a problem that an individual has that needs to be resolved through a therapy. It needs to be fixed. So for that reason, it is considered that the medical model in disabilities has led to a lot of stigma and negative views on disabilities. In contrast, there is what is known as the social model of disabilities. This is a model that has been used by disability rights advocates, and it perceives disability as the result of the barriers that exist in society. These can be three different types of barriers. For instance, environmental barriers. This is related to how we build infrastructure. Imagine that there are some places that are inaccessible for a wheelchair user, so that is an environmental, a type of environmental barrier. There are also attitudes, so there are perceptions of disabilities, there is stigma, there are negative views that can create barriers to the participation of people with disabilities in society. And the third component is the organizational systems. So we design organizations, we design systems like education and healthcare, and sometimes the way in which we design them are not inclusive of people with disabilities. So we unintentionally may be creating barriers to access. So this is how the social model perceives disabilities, the result of the barriers in society. And it is quite important because at the core of the social model of disabilities are the concepts of inclusive and universal design, which means that everything needs to be designed considering what everyone needs. From this perspective, it is important to understand that there are technologies and systems that have been designed to support people with disabilities to participate in societies, and these are known as assistive technologies. You know some of them, so it includes glasses, it includes wheelchairs, it includes hearing aids, and many other products that we have seen and we're familiar with. However, in many parts of the world, access to assistive technologies is quite challenging because they usually get provided through systems that they may not be working in many parts of the world. And that is the reason why we believe that mobile phones can play an important role as assistive technologies. Like I mentioned in the introduction, they contain several assistive technologies that can support people with disabilities to participate in different aspects of societies. But there is not a lot of research conducted in this area. However, the work that we've been doing in the past year can start to highlight some of the important elements of this relationship between mobile, disability, and assistive technologies. To start with, one of our main key findings from our research is the fact that a mobile disability gap exists. This is in terms of ownership to mobile. In a research that we conducted this year, we analyzed the data from the Consumer Survey 2019 from the GSMA Intelligence, and we found that in the 7 markets where we introduced the Washington Group questions to identify people with disabilities, we found that people with disabilities are less likely to own a mobile phone than non-disabled persons. Now, this is important, and just to highlight what is the case in the African region for the 2 countries that we included in the analysis, we can see that in countries like Kenya, the mobile disability gap is relatively small, it's 7%. But then when we look at Uganda, we see a mobile disability gap that it's almost 40%. This means that people with disabilities are around 40% less likely to own a mobile phone than non-disabled people. Uganda, from the countries that we studied, Uganda is a country with the 3rd largest gap. When we disaggregate the data and we look at the differences between men and women for both groups, people with disabilities and people without disabilities, we see that the gap experienced by women with disabilities is the largest. This is when we compare women with disabilities to men without disabilities. We saw that in all the markets that we analyzed, but particularly in a country like Uganda, for instance, the gap, the gender and disability gap increases to 51%. So another finding from our research is that the disability gap is a significant predictor of mobile ownership, but it also compounds the gender gap. We also, in our research, we also look at how people use mobile internet. We look at awareness of mobile internet. We do look at the different use cases of mobile internet, which include communication. It includes the use of financial services through mobile, but it also includes access to entertainment, for instance. However, when we look at the comparison between the people with disability, the mobile users with disabilities and mobile users without disabilities, we also see that a gap exists, and this is across all the markets that we analyzed. Just to highlight, in Kenya and in Africa, the mobile disability gap in usage is above 60%. That means that a significantly smaller proportion of people with disabilities are using mobile internet compared to non-disabled people. The reason behind the mobile disability gaps the reasons are varied, but we have been able to identify 5 main barriers to the digital inclusion of people with disabilities. The first one is a barrier to access. So accessible handsets are often not available in many low and middle income countries, and those handsets that are available tend to be very expensive for the majority of people. Also, what we find from our research is that it is not unusual that people with disabilities own a mobile phone, which is a second-hand phone, or which has been given to them as a second-hand phone. The second is the aspect of the barrier of affordability. For many people, owning a mobile phone is unaffordable. Mobile phones are too expensive for them to buy, but also access to services or being able to afford mobile services can be expensive, particularly for those individuals that rely quite a lot on data. And for them, data fees might be too expensive for them to be able to use mobile freely. Relevance is another barrier. As part of our research, we found that when we spoke with people with disabilities, with their families and their caregivers, it was very clear that mobile are really valuable communication tools. However, when we try to look at the meaning of mobile phone as an assistive technology, they usually didn't see that as being very relevant. And the reason for that links to the next barrier, knowledge and skills. A lot of people do not know that mobile phones have accessibility features embedded in the mobile. And if they know that accessibility features exist, many times they do not know how to use them. So it is important for us to perceive mobile phones as assistive technologies. It is important to consider the role that accessibility features play and the importance of digital skills for people to be able to use these accessibility features. And the fifth type of barrier is safety and security. In our research as well, particularly from the research that we conducted in Kenya and in Bangladesh, we found that when people with disabilities use mobile services, often mobile services haven't been designed for inclusion. And that means that perhaps unintentionally, sometimes when people use the services, they may be put at risk. Just to give you an example, we heard that people who have visual impairment, for instance, when they use mobile money services, they might be defrauded when they make a transaction with the agent. They might deposit an amount of money that when they go home and they check their balance, it's a different amount of money and they get less. Sometimes they might need to pay others that can help them to do these transactions for them. So there is something that we call the hidden cost. So sometimes there is a hidden cost in access to mobile services that needs to be addressed. But even if these barriers exist, we do identify what we call our power users. So there are people with disabilities that use mobile services like anybody else. And just to give you an example, we found that in Kenya, 69% of visually impaired smartphone owners use mobile internet daily compared to 56% of non-disabled smartphone owners. So this is very important because what it says to us is that when the barriers are addressed, everyone can be digitally included. As I mentioned in the introduction, as part of our research, we also have done a landscape study looking at what is happening in terms of digital assistive technologies. I was mentioning before that when we did our research, it was important. Mobile phones were seen as important communication tools, but they were not often seen as assistive technologies. So we wanted to see what was being done in Africa and in Asia in terms of assistive technologies around digital assistive technologies. Now, for our definition, we used a broad definition of digital. So we included information and communication technologies, but we also included other type of digital technologies, such as frontier technologies like machine learning or artificial intelligence or the Internet of Things, IoT, and we try to identify examples that belong to that category. We identified 93 innovations coming from the African, Asian, and the MENA region. Many of them, a large proportion of them, nearly 50% of them, came from South and Southeast Asia. Around 30% came from Sub-Saharan Africa, and around 22% came from the MENA region. When we looked at the type of innovations that are emerging, we see that mobile is playing a really, really important role in digital assistive technologies. We found that around 30% of them were mobile-based solutions, but also there was 50% of innovations that we call digitally enabled services, that many of them are or require access to a mobile phone. So this is something important to remember because it's telling us something really key about the relevance of closing the mobile disability gap. Now, we recognize that insights are important for us to understand what is the digital divide experienced by people with disabilities, but through our research, now we have been able to identify, or we're able to say that innovation is also important. So for that reason, we have now launched the GSMA Assistive Tech Innovation Fund to support innovators, to support startups who are playing a key role in this area, who are driving the digital inclusion of people with disabilities. So just to give you a quick overview of our fund, we're planning to support 8 to 12 projects that will be selected by an independent fund panel. They need to be startups or social enterprises or small and medium enterprises that have developed a mobile assistive technology, and the grants will be provided on a project-based, it will be project-based funding. They need to come from Africa or Asia. And one of our areas that we're very interested to explore is the testing new commercial models. So we found from our research that many innovators are being challenged because there are no funds that can allow them to test particularly different commercial models that can be explored to deploy digital assistive technologies. I described the barriers to digital inclusion of people with disabilities, so we are interested to see innovations that are trying to address at least one of the barriers to the digital inclusion of people with disabilities. And the grants provided will be between 100 to 250,000 pounds. We will be providing mobile-focused mentoring and technical assistance, and we will also be providing networking and global profiling through our different events. Just to give you a little bit more details before we move to the second part of the session today. So we're looking, as I said, to specific project-based applications. For example, examples of how technologies are being scaled up, or a product is being scaled up, or services being scaled up to a different market. The amount will be 100 to 250,000, and we're looking at funding that will be milestone-based. So funding will be provided on an incremental basis, depending on how the startups are delivering the project. And the duration of the projects will be between 15 to 18 months. We will be providing expert advice, and we will be bringing together organizations that can provide relevant insights to the startups and the organizations that are trying to break the barriers to digital inclusion. And we will also offer an opportunity to exchange learnings, exchange experiences between the different grantees, and provide access to different events like GSMA Thrive or the Mobile World Congress, for instance, and provide monitor and evaluation support. So just to close this presentation, We have seen from our research that a mobile disability gap exists, that people with disabilities in many parts of the world are experiencing a digital divide, and that barriers to their digital inclusion exist. And just to highlight, our research is aligned with what others say. So the UN report on disability and development from 2018 found that persons with disabilities have more limited access to information and communications technologies than non-disabled people. And they also found that there is a significant gap between persons with and without disabilities in the use of mobile internet. So we hope that through our research and also through our innovation fund, we will identify different stakeholders, different individuals that are wanting to work with us towards driving the digital inclusion of people with disabilities. And we hope that our insight also can help others take action in this area. So thank you very much. That's all in terms of the presentation. If you have any questions, please write them in the chat, and I will hand over to my colleague Nsomo.
Thank you, Clara. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all from wherever that you're following us from. Courtesy of Clara, we've seen a lot of insights in terms of what has happened on the area of digital assistive technology, the gaps that exist, the need that is there for us to be able to address those gaps, to be able to bring on board the persons with disabilities to exploit opportunities within the digital economy. And with me this afternoon, where I am, is two gentlemen whom I may easily describe as captains of this industry, gentlemen who've gone through the barriers, who've been able to address some of the challenges from both the supply side and demand side, to be able to bring forth innovations that have been able to transform, and which we believe that with time they can be able to scale and have impact across this community. So welcome on board, gentlemen. To start with, probably just take us through the innovations that you've been able to develop with a brief description right from the start into what they've been able to do. We can start with you, Derek, and probably a bit of introduction.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Derek Omari, and I'm calling in from Ghana. I'm really excited to be here to discuss this important topic. I'm the founder and lead innovator for Tech Era. Tech Era is a social enterprise that uses technology to create assistive technologies and also accessible consumer products for persons with disabilities and inaccessible groups in Africa. We've been working on bridging specifically educational gaps that exist for many persons with disabilities through assistive technology innovation and also skill development. We have quite a number of products in our portfolio, but our lead product is what we call iExam, a digital platform that uses mobile technology for blind learners to have access to inclusive educational materials and have access to teacher engagement and resources that can support them to learn. And so that has been our experience. It's been an interesting journey innovating in this space, recognizing that it's a new industry and being able to capitalize on the available resources and connections with stakeholders to be able to provide such an important solution. I'm very sure I'll share more as we go on. Thank you.
Thank you. Probably we hear from Brian, on what you've done for Sixth Sense.
Thanks a lot, Nsomo. So yeah, my name is Brian Mwenda from Kenya. And for us, we are focusing on visually impaired people. So we're trying to see how we can increase the number of visually impaired people participating in different aspects of society. And we started out with mobility being the problem that we addressed, where we are providing mobility assistive devices. And key among them is the Sixth Sense, which is a wearable device that can replace the canes for visually impaired people. So, but right now we are finding ourselves going into education, going into even policy, advocating for the rights of persons with disabilities, because once you start working in this space, you find that there's a lot of work to be done, and we just are glad to be part of the solution. Thank you.
Maybe to pose back to you, because these are very nascent area. We've seen from Clara's presentation that of Africa and Asia on digital assistive technology. In your experience, how has it been like? Is there a commercial opportunity for this, or why is it not very attractive? Derek, from Ghana, how's the experience been like?
Well, being honest, it's been a very challenging experience because it's a field where you don't have a lot of mentorship. It's a field where you'd get to learn, and it's a field where relies on different roles played by different stakeholders. Whilst we recognize that technology has the ability to make things possible for persons with disabilities and for vulnerable groups, we need to also appreciate the fact that it will only come to light with the help of other stakeholders or with the roles that other stakeholders will play. And so as an innovator, one of the major challenges I face, which you've mentioned, is how commercially viable our innovations are. So we come up with very good innovations, very amazing products, but when it comes to being able to have the financial capability to afford them, it becomes a problem. And this was clearly indicated in the presentation that was being done by Clara, that the people we target, unfortunately, are coming from very, very low economic background. And so it makes the commercial viability very difficult. Now we have to resort to other forms of business models, like having a third party either subsidize the product or funding the product for the beneficiaries to be able to have access to use it efficiently. And I think that's been one of our major challenges. I think the other challenges has also been government collaboration, government interest. And I think from Ghana, there's not been very clear commitment from the government or other partners who are willing to come through to support us. And as an innovator, it's a very, very difficult terrain, especially in Africa, knowing that you have to rely on materials from other countries, and it's very expensive innovating. And so it makes the process longer, and it requires a lot of funding. And so as a startup, and because the industry is new, you don't have very interested investors who are willing to invest in the industry. And so it's a very, very rigorous process and very difficult, and demands a lot of courage and a lot of resilience. And so that's been the experience with me.
Over to Brian, has the experience been the same for you in Nairobi?
Yeah, so personally, first of all, I think the numbers are there. So when you're looking for a commercial opportunity, you definitely have to check the size of the market and all that. So I think Africa has over 36 million visually impaired people. So when you look at the opportunity is there. But then when you come back, as Derek has said, to the purchasing power, the purchasing power for visually impaired people is very, very low. And this is because most of them are not employed. Most of them have no ways of generating their own income. So we end up, most of the entrepreneurs in this space end up relying on a model where you're working with charities, you're working with NGOs for your product to reach the market. I think the mobile industry has seen, I think it has evolved a lot in the last few years, and a lot of visually impaired people and persons with disabilities are using it, relying on mobile a lot. And some of the issues addressed are maybe dignity for these people. And when you talk about issues such as dignity, whether this person has to give his phone to someone else to read out their text message, I think some of these issues have been addressed by smartphones or these upcoming technologies in mobile. So when you're dealing with issues such as dignity, it's very difficult to attach a value, a monetary value to that. So as entrepreneurs, I think we have a very difficult time selling our products to people with a very low purchasing power. And these are products that have the potential to change their lives. I mean, so I think it's a role that many people have to play. Government, in terms of education, what is the access of education to persons with disabilities, to what is the level of employment, how can we increase the employment opportunities for these people? Then it will now circle back to them being able to purchase these products. And then I think that will even increase the amount of innovation in this space. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Brian. And I hear from both of you about the role of collaboration between government, between mobile operators, between other stakeholders, be it development community in this area. For your innovations to be able to scale, to be able to make a commercial impact. Based on your experience, probably Brian, in Kenya, have you partnered with government? Have you partnered with the mobile operators? How has it been, and what are the results?
Yeah, so I'd say I've received a lot of support from most stakeholders in the mobile industry, in government also, while coming up with the project. And I'd say, I think in Kenya the stage is much more advanced, where different stakeholders are like discovering the need for an inclusive society. The benefits are out there. Organizations which are more diverse are more profitable, more functioning than those that are less diverse. So I think the government is trying to increase the participation of visually impaired people in employment. And the challenge now maybe comes in terms of accessibility, in terms of the cost. So for us, we were working with a mobile operator here in Kenya to put in some IoT aspects in our project. And we had to set them aside for the first release because the product will become too expensive. Internet access for persons with disabilities is still not at the point that we'd launch a product that fully relies on the internet to function. So I think also that limits on how far we can innovate. But I think there's significant steps being taken by different stakeholders, especially in Kenya, to bring accessibility and affordable internet and assistive devices to persons with disabilities. So I'd say I've had a lot of support. I wouldn't say I've not. Thank you.
Right, Derek, for you, is it the same story within Ghana?
Well, unfortunately, it's not, and it's really inspiring to hear what Brian has gone through. I wish it was the same for Ghana. Ghana has a long way to go in the conversation on accessibility and disability. Unfortunately, when it comes to interest of persons with disabilities and what is important to them and what they interact with the government, it has nothing to do with innovation and mobile technology. It's mainly mostly on some allowances that they are supposed to receive in the government and all that. And so it's always a conversation about increasing the allowances and very little conversation on how can we support local innovators to really create sustainable solutions that can change lives. And I know the government made a commitment during the Global Disability Summit, but nothing really has happened. We've had conversations with different sectors in the government, and mobile operators have heard about our work, but very little is happening, to be honest. But our role as an organization has moved from not only innovating and creating products, but also advocating and leading the conversation in the space. And it's surprising that the only people who seem to be very interested are the development organizations and a few charities. But how do we move beyond that to private sector, to the mobile network operators, to the government, to the education ministry, and all the other stakeholders that are involved? Because I think when we come together and there is a clear push, then we are motivated to be able to innovate. Because of that, we now have to rely on innovating for the mainstream market to be able to have funding to continue to do what we want to do. And sometimes it can be a little bit distracting, but that is the case in Ghana. And that's what we go through as an entrepreneur interested in innovating in assistive technology.
Thank you both. And I think today's session was about looking at how we can be able to accelerate innovation in digital assistive technology. Obviously you've gone through some bit of challenges. Obviously there is something that needs to be done by industry, something that needs to be done by government. So we want to learn from you in terms of your experience. Right from the push into going into this field, while you're saying that commercial viability is minimal. There's a lot of challenges that you have to go through. Based on your experience, just take us through your journey how it's been, and what lessons you can be able to give to innovators that want to come into this space and develop solutions that will be able to make lives a bit easier for PWDs and for them to be included in the digital economy. We can start with Brian, from you, right from the innovation, what's it been like?
Yeah, so I think working in this space, one thing I can say is there needs to be a lot of awareness, especially for the general public, about just a general conversation about disability. Let's not just sideline it as a small conversation or something that we should be shy about, because you find people, they've never had interactions maybe with someone who's visually impaired. They see them as people who are in need of charity only. So if these people go now to manage our businesses, they will definitely not be employing people with disabilities. So I think even the GSMA report is something that needs to be put out there for people to understand. We live with people with disabilities. Let's learn how to live together. I think the social aspect of people understanding just the whole topic about disability, I think it needs to go out there, because you start a project like this and you present somewhere, and then people don't really understand the problem. So they ask you, so what is the problem? And then people need to understand this is not just somewhere where we do the charity model of solving the problem. So then there needs to be like a commercial case, and that's how the problem gets solved, sustainability. So I think for me, the journey started with passion, because it needs a lot of resilience. It's really difficult, and Derek will tell you. I think it's really difficult going out there every single day, meeting all these challenges. So I'd encourage people to get into this space, but then it needs a bit of passion, I think. But once you start, definitely there's no stopping. Yeah, I think once you start, the passion, and you meet all these incredible human beings, and you have that power to solve a small problem for them, then I think it's just amazing. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Derek, probably your story.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Brian. Well, I'm going to talk about just three things. The first, I would say, is time. Innovation in assistive technology, especially in Africa, takes a lot of time. If you are a hardware innovator, that's even going to take you longer because of access to materials, access to infrastructure, testing, and all the barriers that you face. And so as an innovator who is interested in this space, you should give yourself some time. Don't be too hard on yourself, because if you expect very fast results, you may give up very early. And so because what you need to understand is these are people, you may or may not be in their shoes or have a disability. So you need time to understand them. You need time to get the feedback. You need time to create the solution and go back and keep iterating until it works really well for them. So don't be pressured about wanting to finish quickly and have something on the market, because then what happens is that it will not be fit for purpose. The second thing I want to talk about is immersion. It's very important as an innovator to immerse yourself in the space that you are concerned about. You cannot want to develop a solution for a group of people you don't really know about their daily lives, about the challenges that they go through, about the things that they basically face on day-to-day basis. I think that to be very successful, you need to be highly interactive with the persons that you intend to innovate for, so that you can achieve the best insights that will inform your innovation. And so I have committed myself and immersed myself over the past 5 years, working closely with persons with disabilities, involving them in the innovation process. And I think that we are on a good path, and I think that there is some light at the end of the tunnel. The third area that I want to talk about is evidence. Because assistive technology innovation is a new field, especially in Africa, you would not have a lot of interested investors or partners who would be willing to come in easily. And so it's very, very important to create some evidence of your impact. And that is difficult, to be honest. But when you have clear evidence of what your innovation can do or how it can transform lives, it makes the conversation very easy. It makes bringing people on board very easy, because now you are not only getting them to aspire what the solution could be or what the impact could be, but we are rather showing them the evidence and how this can be scaled if they come on board. I don't think it's very straightforward, but I think that so far that's what I've seen to work, because when I started my journey and I reached out to the government, and I didn't receive very open or very good welcome. But when our work started creating some evidence and some impact and some testimonial from the beneficiaries, you realize that it was very easy having some conversation
Right.
on how to move work forward. So these are the three things that I'll definitely recommend.
Right, and you know, speaking about the numbers, how is it in terms of impact within Ghana? You know, probably just give us a snapshot. What's the story been? What's the success? And then over to Brian, and then we can be able to check whether Clara has a few questions from the audience.
Okay, so with Ghana, Tech Ever has been able to create access to opportunities for persons with for more than 2,500 persons with disabilities, with our different innovations and intervention programs. Like I mentioned, there is a clear gap in terms of accessing very good opportunities for persons with disabilities. So there are good products, good services, good opportunities, but people cannot access that. And what we do is to fill that gap with our innovation, with our solutions. And we can confidently say that we have done this for more than 2,500 persons with disability. We are on the path of reaching about 10,000 people when we start scaling our lead product, which is iExam for students with disabilities. It's exciting, but I think that that's a very small number. There is so much to do in Africa. So that's been our number in terms of impact.
Brian, how's it in terms of impact, in terms of success stories?
Yeah, so I think for me, what I'm really happy about is seeing like our users using, because we always say we are creating freedom of independent movement, and then how do they use this freedom of independent movement? So I'll give an example of 5 guys who came together. The first question they asked me, okay, now we have these devices we can move around unaided, but then where are we going to? We just sit in the house all day. So they came up with this idea of starting like a local library project, and they've just started it actually, and it's something that I'm very passionate even about supporting. So it's something that you can see once you give them like even a new way of thinking, like some hope of things will get better. They also start preparing for those opportunities that are going to come. So for me, it's very, very encouraging. Right now, we have 1,500 users of different products across the country. So we have people in the rural areas, and we're trying to create products that can be used by anyone anywhere in the country. So it's been very encouraging to see even the kind of ripple effect this kind of products can have. Yeah.
Thanks a lot to both of you. I think our time is running out. I don't know whether, Clara, we have a few questions, 1, 2 from the audience.
We have a question. So could you tell us a little bit about how COVID has impacted your work and the way you are delivering your solutions, but also if you have any lessons that you've learned that could be adopted, post-COVID?
Well, I think COVID has not been very friendly to us. We innovate in the education space, and we have different products that allows us to get some revenue to continue to do what we want to do. And unfortunately, COVID caused a lot of schools to close down. Schools are still closed down, which means that they cut in our revenues, which means that we don't have enough funding to continue to innovate. But to stay relevant, we decided to pivot and leverage on look at what are we good at and how can we use that to stay relevant. And so we started providing some digital skill training and innovation and product development training for persons in Ghana. But also COVID made us think about how can we ensure that there is inclusion of persons with disabilities in using the interventions that prevent the spread of the virus. And so we created a smart hand washing tap that ensures that persons who are using wheelchair and persons who have some motor difficulties and spastic difficulties can be able to have access to washing their hands easily, since that is the main way to prevent the spread of COVID. And so I think that it calls us to innovate more, it calls us to expand our impact to younger people and inspiring them to be innovators in the assistive technology space. But in terms of numbers on revenues, it's not been very friendly, but we are trying to survive.
Brian?
Yeah, so I think for us, what COVID has done is validated the problem and the solution, but then it's really not translating into more users or more revenue, mostly because so you find visually impaired people need that now. Everyone is saying social distance and everything, but still someone needs that physical contact to be able to move around. So for us, we're creating a product that can help someone now get rid of that caregiver and be independent completely. So the problem is there, the need is very much there, and the solution works very well. But then COVID has reduced the amount of disposable income for individuals, for households, and most charities, most CSR companies have cut down on CSR and all that. So we're really finding it difficult to get partners to get more users using our product. So I think it's a bit challenging, but we're trying to see how we can go around that. Yeah.
Can I ask one more question? I think we're running a little bit over the time, but if you were to look back, and if you look at, Brian from 3 years ago and Derek from 3 years ago, what is the main lesson? Like now, what would you tell Derek and Brian from 3 years ago? What have you learned in this journey? The main key lesson.
I was hoping Ryan will go first, but
now I can go first.
Okay, please do.
Yeah. So I think for me, I would just say don't give up. Yeah, because there are times when it's so difficult. And you're trying to get all these things done. Nothing seems to be working, but I think just being out there every day, pushing new leads, just working on the solution, trusting the product, because I was very sure about the product. We had a lot of user involvement, so you're very sure that this is something that these people need, and this is something that I have the ability to bring to the market. So I just tell my younger self not to just keep pushing, and one day it will work out. Yeah.
Well, I think I share a very similar status with Brian, but I think that I would really encourage my younger self not to worry, because when I started, I was a little bit worried. I wasn't sure what the future would be like. I wasn't sure what the end outcome would be like. I don't think I'm at the end, but looking back, I'm proud of who I have become in terms of the things that I have learned, and so the best advice I give to myself 3 years ago would be, this is going to be a learning journey for you, because you're going to learn about yourself. You're going to learn about what annoys you, what makes you happy, and you're also going to learn about how resilient you can be and how courageous you could be. So for me, I think that I didn't realize that 3 years ago, and I'm glad that I've learned so much about myself.
Thanks to both of you. And, as you put it, we cannot put it better. We continue to learn, we continue to keep the focus, to not give up, and to ensure that we do what needs to be done to have nobody being left behind. Thanks a lot, and back over to you, Clara.
Sorry, I couldn't find the mute button. So thanks everyone for joining the session today. Don't hesitate to contact us if you have any more questions. You can go to the GSMA website. If you go to Mobile for Development Assistive Tech, you'll be able to find the reports where we extracted the insights, but also follow TechEra and Hope Tech Plus in their journeys, because they are doing some amazing innovations. And I hope you found this session interesting and you learned a lot today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.